the tension within society between the sacred and the shamanistic, and sometimes it's within a religion, and sometimes it's as a religion is trying to move in and displace the old ways. So I'm reminded of, actually a description of, it's a fantasy novel that I recently reread, but it describes some accuracies from history. The Mists of Avalon, which is a sort of a retelling of Arthurian legend from the perspective of the women involved. And it portrays the tension between the old ways, like the Druids and the fairies and such, and the new ways, the Christians, and portrays Arthur as exactly at this nexus between them, feeling this tension, feeling the value in the old, and also the pull of the new, and frankly the order of the new, the organization of the new, and everything that organization promises, and also the chaos and the unexpected, and the passion and the fury of the old. Right. So for all of us, we can imagine, we can recognize that there is tension between order and chaos, right? And similarly, it was episode 67 on February 13th of this year, we talked about Carnival, which is in the U.S. It manifests as Mardi Gras, but we have attended a Carnival together, and I've been at a couple more in Latin America, and we spoke some about what a former professor of mine who works on Carnival in the Atlantic coast of Brazil describes as some of the really necessary parts of this. These 3 or 4, I can't remember, 3 or 4 days of just freedom before the 40 days of very careful attention to your religion of Lent before Good Friday and then Easter. And so my professor, Dan Linger, anthropology professor at UC Santa Cruz, talked about symbolic reversals of power being important in Carnival. And, that can manifest as men dressing up as women and vice versa, and young people acting as if they're old and have power, and employers acting as employees and vice versa. And of course, in the old days, that could even manifested with regard to slave relationships. So, during Carnival, sort of all of the expected rules were on hold. Like everyone knew that they were coming back, but they were on hold for a little bit.
So it's a little bit analogous to what we were talking about with respect to babbling back at a baby.
Yeah.
Right.
Interesting.
If you, from the other side of the power relationship, say, yeah, here's what that's like.
Yeah.
Here's what that seems to be like.
Here's how it seems like you're acting when you do this.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm also, I don't know how new a thought it is, but, one of the things at the Carnival that we experienced in Ecuador in 2016 was, one of the sort of games that gets played has to do with this canned foam that people are shooting at each other.
Espuma de Carnaval.
Right, exactly. And I was remembering, we may have even showed a picture of it, this police marching band being sprayed with foam by onlookers. And the thing is, it's actually, if in the U.S. context, the tension between police and others is such that it's almost hard to imagine such a thing. Yeah. But the idea that, this band is just playing on as people that, they would have had a very different power relationship with under any other circumstances, were freed in some very non-lethal way to blow off steam at them. How much better are those relations between one party and the next when there is this sort of recurring pressure relief?
It does suggest that we could all use some Carnival, some regular, knowing that it's coming, being able to prepare for it, knowing that it's finite, knowing that it will end. But that I think some of what happened last summer in the U.S. and to some degree large cities around the world with regard to the protests that became riots was, as we said then, a response to lockdowns. But it was in part precisely a response not just to lockdowns of being away from one another, but there were no concerts, there were no festivals, the bars were closed, and it's easy to dismiss such things, festivals and concerts and bars and large parties, as unimportant, but they're not. They're not. They are necessary for humans. And, different people enjoy them differently. Some people have none of them in their lives and do just fine. And some of them live for these things and maybe could do with a little bit less and would be more productive. But the idea that they are frivolous and can just be dismissed with no cost is absurd. So there are symbolic reversals of power in Carnival. There are rituals of rebellion and critiques of the status quo, and inviting in of the liminal. So specifically, this professor of mine 20, almost 30 years ago was talking about working at the edge of consciousness, specifically at Carnival, that this is a place for conscious exploration of and play. And I'm reminded of that too in this terrific book. This is a 2006 book by Barbara Ehrenrich, Dancing in the Streets. I don't even know where my camera is. There we go. Dancing in the Streets, A History of Collective Joy, which is a book that I read actually as part of one of the programs I taught. The linguist I was teaching with recommended it, and we read this. And I have just a short section from Chapter 2 that she's called Civilization and Backlash to share. Almost as soon as ecstatic rituals appear in the historical, that is, written record, a note of ambivalence enters into the story, a suggestion of social tensions surrounding these rituals and even violent hostility towards their participants. Euripides' play, The Bacchae, for example, both records these tensions and expresses what seems to be a tormented ambivalence on the part of the playwright. In the play, Pentheus, the king of Thebes, greets the god with derision and determines to suppress him by force. "Go at once to the Electron Gate," he commands his officers. "Tell all my men who bear shields, heavy or light, all who ride fast horses or twang the bowstring, to meet me there in readiness for an assault on the Bacchae. This is past all bearing if we are to let women so defy us." At first, the play seems to take the god's side, mocking the uptight Pentheus and showing the community elders piously joining the Maenads in their revelry. After all, if the beautiful young stranger is indeed a god, it is incumbent on good citizens to observe his rights. But things end badly for both sides. Pentheus is killed and dismembered by his own mother, who, in her god-given ecstasy, mistakes him for a lion. We've all been there. The ambivalence and hostility, that was not Ehrenreich, that was my editorializing, in case you guys were wondering. To continue with Ehrenreich's words. Actually, this is all fabulous, but I'm just going to skip to this paragraph here. "We have some evidence from a very different part of the ancient world of the dampening effect of civilization and social hierarchy on traditional rituals. Recent carbon-14 dating of an archaeological site in Oaxaca suggests that the earliest residents, who were hunter-gatherers living about 9,000 years ago, met on a cleared dance ground for rituals that included the entire community. Later, with the rise of agriculture, rituals appear to have been enacted solely by initiates who were social achievers or members of an elite, and most likely men. Finally, with the emergence of organized and militarized states 2,000 years ago, the archaeologists deduced that, quote, many important rituals were performed only by trained full-time priests using religious calendars and occupying temples built by corvée labor. In the Oaxacan case, only a few thousand years appear to have elapsed between the archaic danced rituals of Paleolithic bands and their refinement into the formal rituals of the civilized state." And I mean, the whole book I recommend, but it really is both an exploration of the history of ecstasis, of ecstasy, of finding ecstasy through movement, through dance, through. She doesn't go, I think, if I remember, too much into the use of exogenous substances, although those are certainly present in almost all of these cases, at least by some, and the orthodoxy, the controlling part of society that says, actually, no, you shan't do that because, well, you'll be less productive. And the pushback comes with lots of words, and some of them are true, and some of them is just a cover story. But you'll be more productive if you don't do that. We're going to restrict that just to say Carnival, but really, it's about control. And people experiencing ecstasis, experiencing these kinds of, hyperconscious, perhaps entheogen, inflamed states, are hard to control. They're hard to predict, and it's hard to know what they're going to do next and what they're going to think next, too.